Once again, I'm asking you, what if Garchomp was in Gen 1 OU? When it comes to quad Blizzard Week Pokemon in RBY, it's either hit or miss. You could be like Salamence and have absolutely nothing to do with the tier, because you just have nothing to offer. Or you could be like Landorus, where the weakness is not really enough and just ends up getting banned anyways. In my opinion, Garchomp is more like Landorus. Not exactly, because Explosion is a great move that Garchomp doesn't have. But regardless, I'm actually leaning towards Garchomp being too much for the tier, which I don't think is what I thought about originally when I first made the video. When I originally made this video, I think 2 years ago, my set for Garchomp was highly unoptimized. I had Sword Stance on it, which you shouldn't bother with given how great Garchomp's crit rate is. And I gave it Hyper Beam, which is useless when you have Stab Earthquake. Stab Earthquake hits as hard as Hyper Beam. So, now that we have an optimized version of what a Garchomp set should look like, I feel like the Blizzard weakness isn't enough. And I feel like if you use this thing on proper Paralysis spam teams, there's just nothing you can do to beat it. Why do I say that? Well, for starters, just look at the stats. They're just insane. If you compare to the other ground type, the one that's its main competition, you have the exact same attack set as Rhydon. So right off the bat, you have the strongest physical attack in the game. And it's terrifying, because you have things that are just better than Rhydon. Your HP is super high as well. Higher than Rhydon, actually. Which not only has its own advantages, which I'll get into later, but just in general makes you super tanky. And unlike Rhydon, you don't have 2 quad weaknesses. And that's because of your dragon typing. You're not weak to water, and you're not weak to grass. Which, these alone fundamentally change just how your matchups are with Slowbro and Victreebel. Since both can only hit you neutrally, they are slower and they are terrified of a critical Earthquake. So that's something that right off the bat, Garchomp can just do better than Rhydon. Its defenses are... I'm pretty sure the extra 3 in HP is not enough. I think Rhydon's definitely tankier on the physical side. But it doesn't matter, because you have 85 special defense, so you can definitely tank special hits way better than Rhydon ever could. And along with that, 80 special attack is not bad in the slightest. Tauros is using Blizzard, or Thunderbolt, or Fire Blast all the time in RBY, and it's only 70 special. 70 special, and its Blizzard's already the strongest thing you can use on an Executor. 80 is strictly better. It means that Fire Blast is hitting things for pretty good damage in the tier. And then 102 speed. You're faster than Zapdos, which not only just makes you, I think, automatically in the top 4? Oh no, top 5. I think you're like the 4th. No, sorry, not the 4th. I think you're the 5th fastest thing in the tier. Because you have Jolteon at the top, and then Alakazam, and then Tauros and Gengar with 110. So yeah, right off the bat, you're just one of the fastest things. But with those 4 that I mentioned, Jolteon, Zam, Gengar, Tauros, there's one huge difference that they have that Garchomp simply can't relate to. And that's Thunder Wave. Garchomp is the fastest Pokemon that doesn't care about Thunder Wave. Paralysis is a fundamental and key component of RBY, and it's so devastating that even fast Pokemon like Alakazam can be slower than things like freaking Snorlax. Garchomp not caring about that, not only does it give him plenty of very easy opportunities. For example, if a Zam tries to go for Thunder Wave, Garchomp can switch into that, and Garchomp can very easily take on Alakazam 1v1. It's extremely easy to switch this guy in. It also means that it's by far the most terrifying Pokemon in late game. Nothing else can paralyze this outside of Victreebel and Executor with Stun Spore. And with critical Earthquakes or critical Fire Blast, or just regular Fire Blast or regular Earthquakes, Victreebel and Executor do not want to deal with that. Stun Spore is incredibly risky and could be very easily punished. And even if Garchomp's paralyzed, it's still one of the fastest things in the tier. So against other paralyzed mons, still a good chance it's going to win that. Also a good chance it can outspeed, or just crit anyways. So that's just the stats. And then having, I think I talked about it a little bit for its typing. And yes, the quad weakness of Blizzard is pretty bad, but the important thing you need to know is that your HP is like hard carrying you. And for a lot of the Pokemon, such as Tauros and Chansey, you actually can survive at least one ice attack, which is huge. The difference between a 2-hit KO and a 1-hit KO means that Garchomp always has a chance to do something very dangerous. Tauros is scared of a burn from Fire Blast, and as you can imagine, Earthquake just hits hard in general. One Earthquake is a 3-hit KO, 2 is a... or 2 is already pretty bad, but get a crit and Tauros is just basically done for. And then with Substitute, 108 HP, that means that it takes 2 seismic tosses in order to break a sub. Which means, depending on the Chansey set, yeah, this thing can just hard wall Chanseys with only seismic toss. Granted, with Garchomp in the future, that might become a moot point, since in execution, there's a very good chance that Ice Beam becomes mono, like your mono attack. But even if that's the case, you still have, like, Gengar with Nightshade. Although Gengar also might just not even bother. Gengar is probably better off just going for Explosion right away. Because, spoiler alert, I didn't make a replay on it, but I promise you, Gengar gets O-code by Garchomp's Earthquake. If you don't believe me, you can leave angry comments, but there's a 1% chance that it absolutely does like 1,000,000 damage. But yeah, Fire Blast is also just great for Executor, does good damage. And last but not least, I had to choose between Rock Slide and Slash. The issue with Rock Slide in RBY is that super effective, it does the exact same amount of damage as ASAP Earthquake. So against Jinx or Cloyster, things like that, you're unironically just better going for Earthquake because it's more accurate. But there's one Pokemon that doesn't care about Earthquake, and that's Zapdos. So at first I thought, okay, just go for Slash. Slash can easily fight Zapdos 1v1, and along with that, you also can just do decent damage on anything. If you're not sure if they're going to switch to like an Earthquake resist or something, Slash is just good, consistent damage. And in general, with it being more accurate than Fire Blast, I could very easily see opportunities where you would just rather go for that against Executor, not risk missing a Fire Blast. And the same would go for Rock Slide as well, since Rock Slide isn't accurate, so just go for Slash. And technically Slash does do like appropriate damage. I think it does like around like 31%. But Rock Slide is 44. And the difference between Rock Slide and Slash is that Rock Slide can crit for way more damage. Rock Slide without a crit already does 44. So if you give the ability to maybe have a crit, you're doing insane damage to Zapdos. So I was pretty torn, and I think it's mostly out of perspective. But I think Rock Slide is a little bit better. Not to mention with Rock Slide, like, I'd argue it's just probably harder to switch into. The only thing that's resisting it is Rhydon. And Rhydon resists Slash as well. But you also have Gengar that can switch to a Slash. So, like, it's not, like, a big deal. But for me, I'm a big fan of just tiny optimizations. And I'm normally a big Rock Slide hater on this channel, if you've seen enough of my videos. I really don't like the move, but I think in this case, it's fine. But if you want to switch for Slash, go ahead. You could also potentially switch out Substitute for Swords Dance. I wouldn't recommend it, but if the meta shifts to where Zam, Gengar, and Chansey aren't using Sid damaging moves as much, it means you're going to find less opportunities to go for Substitute in the first place. But at the same time, behind the sub, you actually have the opportunity to 1v1 any Blizzard users. And that's probably the main reason why I think Garchomp would actually get banned to Ubers. The thing with the ice types is that you can just actually threaten them. Quasar then takes like a 3-hit KO from Earthquake. A critical is a 2-hit KO. So Quasar can't really afford to take any chip. And even if it does take some chip, there's also Tauros. And how many teams can you think of that can handle Garchomp, Snorlax, and Tauros? Let alone other fast threats like Zam or Starmie. Jinx is kind of in the same boat. It gets 2-hit KO by Earthquake, and Garchomp's faster. So it's unironically a game where you have to decide if you want to risk the 20%-ish chance to get crit or not. Almost a 1 in 4 for Garchomp to just win. So Jinx, for many cases, is just way too risky. And not to mention Blizzard could miss, and if it missed, you're just kind of screwed. Starmie, at the very least, does have a consistent win against Garchomp. Blizzard does OHKO it. It might be a range, but even if it's like 95 to 100, something like that, it's still basically guaranteed, so the Garchomp player's never risking it. But even then, Starmie can get paralyzed, and if Starmie takes any chip, an Earthquake is very easily able to kill. You'll see later in the video, but a critical Earthquake does 90% to Starmie. And this is why, again, I think Garchomp shines the best on Paraspam teams. And it can be, I'd argue it's even a bigger threat than Tauros. If you have Garchomp in the back, you are way more likely to use your Tauros recklessly. Bring out Tauros against Starmie and go for Body Slam. If that Starmie gets paralyzed, it might just be screwed. You can tell me in the comments what you think, but I'm very confident in Garchomp being way too much. But if you don't believe me, let's look at these replays, and you can tell me what you think. Now, some of these you'll get pretty lucky. Most of these are just replays that I did on the first try, but I think you've got to get the point. So Earthquake, already doing a third. And then Fire Blast, I think it's technically also doing a third. And while the burn is very promising, you're probably better off just going for Earthquake. Solely because it's doing more damage. And if you get a crit with an Earthquake, yeah, like Tauros will probably survive, but it's not doing too much after that. Now for Snorlax, I think Fire Blast is a little bit more justifiable here. But because of the accuracy, you can still try to justify going for crits with Earthquake. Snorlax still won't survive long after that. But at the same time, it's one of the few things that can actually paralyze Garchomp. Hyper Beam hits hard, Ice Beam hits hard, Self-Destruct hits hard. So it's anyone's game, really. And then for Chansey, like I said, you can actually survive Ice Beam, which makes a huge difference. So Garchomp, it's a good go either way, but it's also one where it's more inherently in Garchomp's favor. Since it's almost a 1 in 4 that just wins the matchup without even having to worry about Ice Beam. And even if it does get hit, as long as it doesn't get frozen or crit, which are both unlikely, Garchomp is going to win anyways. So that's something to think about. And for this next one, let's show off how good Substitute is, with a Pokemon that would normally beat it pretty easily. I don't have a replay of just fighting Cloyster 1v1. This will be the one with Cloyster, and you'll be able to see some nuance with that, don't worry. But I also think that this is also going to show you just how strong Garchomp is once it's actually set up, and why I think the Ice types aren't enough to keep it in check. And this is going to be a Cloyster, it's going to be smart. So Rocks right there, that's even going easy. Well, that's about the same amount as Earthquake would do. But yeah, here's Cloyster going for Clamp. Not even Blizzard. Going for Clamp since, specifically, for a fact that it can break the sub and still do more chip damage. Hopefully making it so that Garchomp doesn't have to go for another sub. But yeah, that's a crit, and that just did half of Cloyster's health. And this was a Garchomp that was kind of playing it easy too. Going for Fire Blast and Rock Slide. It could have just been going for Earthquake to be more optimized. At the same time though, Cloyster did get unlucky with missing the Blizzard. But also at the same time, Garchomp could have very easily gone for another substitute. And that's another thing. Since Garchomp gets OHKO'd by Stab Blizzards anyways, there's really no reason why you can't just go for 4 substitutes and fish for a miss. If you manage to get the miss, you basically win the game, because there's no way the Ice type's recovering in time. And Garchomp is a Pokemon that can very easily take 2 things out, or 2 things out and weekend something. Sorry about that. So yeah, just so much progress can be made in just a few turns. Garchomp is just that guy. And as we look at this replay with Alakazam, I'd like to remind you all that Charizard and Garchomp are tied for my favorite Pokemon of all time. So I'm personally pretty happy to see it do good. But not this good. I would not have expected that a Garchomp could be hit with a Psychic from Alakazam, get a Special Drop, and still survive. But again, 85 Special Defense, that's good for this period of time, and 108 HP is just fantastic. It's one of the bulkiest things in the tier, by far. And for Executor, Fire Blast with a crit does way more than I would have expected, but look at that, that's almost 70%. I wouldn't have suspected that, but that should probably show you why Executor seriously fears Garchomp, and why Stun Spore is actually pretty risky. If Executor has any chip damage whatsoever, or is already status, something like that, do you even bother going for Paralysis? It might not even work for you. And the funny part is that, because of Fire Blast having a 30% chance to burn, unironically, Explosion becomes a non-factor as well. This is another reason why, while Slash is promising, you probably shouldn't bother with it at the end of the day. Fire Blast can just patch up any insecurities about the Executor matchup in general. And I think the chance to burn Executor more than makes up for the fact that Explosion is dangerous. Or actually, that's the reason why. Like, Slash is more accurate, but burning Executor, that's just too good to pass up. And now, we have Garchomp versus Jinx. And this just fully depends on if you get the crit or not. Blizzard is super dangerous, so could go either way. Not much to really say there. And then for Rhydon. Now, I'm going to say Rhydon isn't full on power creep with Garchomp in the format. And that's because it technically walls Zapdos way better. But you're going to see in a little bit, but Garchomp doesn't really care about Drill Peck either. But for Swellbro here, what are you going to do? If you can't paralyze Garchomp, it's basically a sitting duck. At the very least, though, I will say, Surf hits way harder than I would have suspected. That's at least one thing, but if you can't be faster than the Garchomp, it's impossible to actually take advantage of that. Starmie, thankfully, does have a good Oko, but that's only with Blizzard. If it's using any other move, like Psychic or like Surf, the odds are significantly more in Garchomp's favor. But at the same time, Blizzard is already the most used move on Starmie. And why would it become unpopular nowadays with Garchomp? If anything, it'd be just standard. But still, as you see there, if Starmie misses, or if it's paralyzed, Starmie is just absolutely terrified. Garchomp, if it has a bad day, could just crit and remove Starmie off the face of the earth. And last but not least, we got Zapdos. This is like the one replay where I did go for Slash. And yeah, 35 damage, that's pretty good. But Drill Peck is not. That is only 22%. However, I'm still gonna say that's so I'm still gonna say that you're not replacing Rhydon. And that's because even though 22% isn't really that bad, the difference here is that a crit does matter. If you do 44% on Garchomp, that it absolutely would care about. Meanwhile, a crit Drill Peck on Rhydon, you still don't care about that. You still have higher defense and you resist it, so you don't care. But that's not really, like, it doesn't really matter too much. Because even if Rhydon's a better ground type into Zapdos, that's like the only advantage it has. Garchomp is way more threatening and just takes on way more things. And also, Garchomp is just good against Rhydon. But anyways, here's the tier list. And even Starmie here, you can actually just put in a bad matchup. Because it really depends on the moveset and if it's already statused. And Starmie becoming status is very easy to do with Jolteon or Alakazam with the format, Chansey or other Starmies. Hell, even Tauros. I think Tauros is going to change more to be like an aggressive mid-game Pokemon, trying to go for body slams and paralyze things. And it's already harder to do with Tauros. Having to do with Tauros and Garchomp, I think that's a little too much for people to ask for. So if you ask me, I think Garchomp's getting banned at Ubers. But what do you think? Please let me know in the comments below. But until next time, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.